Now, the African Export-Import Bank, or Afreximbank, was set up some 28 years ago to transform Africa's trade by providing a range of, by its own description, critical trade finance facilities aimed at supporting businesses in its member countries on the continent. Headquartered in Cairo with branch offices in Abuja, Abidjan, Harare and Kampala, how far has the bank grown to deliver on its original transformative mandate? Well, in one of its adverts it says is implementing catalytic interventions on its own or with partners with whom it is delivering innovative trade initiatives, capacity building and knowledge development programs. So, beyond the words, how is it actually shaping the continent's future? Well, one way it is hoping to do so is through healthcare. And today it moved a step closer to achieving this goal with a groundbreaking ceremony here in Abuja for the first of what it says will be medical centers of excellence across Africa.
I see this project, which we are here today to celebrate, in the broad context, not just as an important part of the wider effort to improve health system through strategic infrastructure investment, but also contributing to economic growth of the country, and all of this entirely by a non-government actor.
And that's the Nigerian Minister of Health there, and I understand he was representing President Buhari at that groundbreaking event. Well, for more on this, I'm suitably delighted to say that the president of Afreximbank, Professor Benedict Oramah, joins me now in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charles.
Busy day for you, I take it?
Yeah, very, very.
Well, we're glad you could make out time to be here. Tell us more about these medical centers of excellence that you're funding across the continent.
Thank you very much. As a bank that was created to support our continent through the promotion of trade and trade enabling infrastructure, one key area that attracted our attention and which entered our strategy, our 5-year strategy that is ending by the end of this year, is the healthcare industry. We found great inequity in the way healthcare is delivered on the continent. Apart from what we saw in the past 2 years under the COVID-19 pandemic, we are a continent that is suffering from significant outflow of resources because we do not have the infrastructure to take care of our own people. About $5 billion is spent by our countries, the African countries, as they do medical tourism to Asia alone. Nigeria actually spends about $1 billion. And this is a continent that doesn't have that kind of money to spend. At the same time, we have this paradox of having our people as experts in Europe, in America, and in the Middle East. So the issue is, why are we not able to do something for ourselves? Why are we having the brain drain and, of course, the financial drain also?
Well, that's an important question you raise. I mean, do you ask the governments that you work with those questions?
The issue is that the governments, we have a serious fiscal situation in the continent. Many of them have so many challenges. And sometimes the priorities do not favor the healthcare industry. And we have had the situation historically of making healthcare largely a public sector affair. So it's not being promoted as something that can be done by the private sector, unlike what you see in many other parts of the world. And when you call it a public sector affair in a continent that has fiscal challenges, the countries do not have money, then you can see why our healthcare infrastructure has deteriorated. So what we're doing now through the African Medical Center of Excellence is to prove a concept, to prove that we can do it. We can build the infrastructure that can catalyze the private sector to actually come in and bring the kind of investment that we require to begin to deal with the healthcare challenges that we all face.
Yeah, but how exactly is that going to work? You're funding this, but you're letting the private sector run it. Is that the idea?
We are actually developing it together with King's College Hospital.
Right.
We now have a few partners coming in, the NMPC, the Bank of Industry, Africa Finance Corporation.
And those are all financial partners.
Yeah, they're joining us as,
right.
as partners, as equity. But the idea there is go ahead, lead the way, show that it can be done. And what we're doing, we didn't enter it with one of our arms tied behind us. Our board supported it in a big way because we know that this can be a demonstration project for the continent. So we are building something that will encourage all our people that are abroad who are healthcare professionals to see a place where they can practice.
Right, and how many of these are you intending to build across Africa?
About 5, ultimately. We're hoping that we'll do 1 per sub-region of the continent.
Right. And I mean, given the size of the African population, and as I'm sure you know, the innumerable challenges the continent faces, the enormous demand for quality healthcare, I mean, this clearly doesn't even begin to scratch the surface, does it?
No, it does. It does, because what it does is to catalyze investments in the sector. You see, there are certain things that can be done, but are not being done because the ecosystem is not there to facilitate it. You see, when you have a quaternary or tertiary care hospital, then you are able to also provide an environment for teaching and research. You are then able to provide an environment for people to invest in primary and secondary care facilities. You are able then to begin to attract certain kinds of investors, not necessarily from Africa, but coming into Africa to take advantage of the opportunity. They say today that every African spend about 25 cents out of every $1 they make in healthcare. That is potentially huge, but nobody is tapping it because the ecosystem is not there. So what we're doing is to create a system whereby we can facilitate technology to come in, facilitate we stop the brain drain so people know where to practice. We bring the state-of-the-art diagnostic facilities so people can do all the checks that they need to do. Because if you don't do if you don't have facility for diagnostics, you cannot have a viable healthcare infrastructure. So this facility will provide all of this so that those who now want to build other things do not have to spend too much money. Because a small operator who wants to go into the hospital, if he looks at what he has to invest in, it becomes daunting. But when some of these are now taken care of, under the arrangement we have in place under the African Medical Center of Excellence, then they can do all that things. So, then the ecosystem leverages itself to then become bigger and bigger, and we begin then to promote intra-regional trade in tourism.
Right. And I suppose for you, as the Afreximbank, it's also a learning experience, isn't it? Because, I mean, you fund a lot of government-type projects, but you're not funding many private projects, are you?
No. We actually do a lot of private projects. We do less of government projects. What we do, our balance sheet is very liquid. So what happens is that we respond to crises as we see them. We see ourselves as a market failure bank. Under normal circumstances, we prefer to finance the private sector because we know that will be the engine, that's the engine of growth for our continent.
Well, because the impression that I got was that when it comes to development in Africa, you're paying more attention to fairly basic development things for Africa I mean, you're not actually paying attention to those things that create jobs and just, you're paying more attention to things that give income to governments.
Nope. We do things that create jobs. We do things...
And that's your primary motivation,
yes,
is it?
Things that create jobs, things that promote trade, things that bring innovation, things that help the youth to realize their full potentials. These are the kind of things we do. And that is why I said that the private sector is the engine of growth. So what we do is we de-risk sectors that they participate in so that they can do more. We open markets for them. We do the investments that make certain activities easier to be engaged in. And we go to the government when we see that governments are facing difficulties. For example, during the 2015-2016 commodity crisis, we immediately pivoted towards government, provided about $10 billion to the central banks and the commercial banks. Why? Because at that time, we saw the shock as potentially destructive.
Okay, I'm going to come back because I want to talk a little bit about your relationship with commercial banks and all of that. So please stay with us. We're going to take a short break. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with the president of the African Export-Import Bank, or Afrexim, Professor Benedict Oramah. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now, as you know, the health shocks of COVID-19 and many other diseases continue to batter Africa. So the major African lending institution, the African Export-Import Bank, or Afrexim, has stepped in to develop medical facilities it says will be centers of excellence across the continent. And today, the groundbreaking ceremony of one of those medical centers took place here in the Nigerian capital, Abuja. And when completed, it's intended to provide a range of specialist healthcare services in partnership with King's College Hospital, London. That's just one of many projects Afreximbank is involved in across the continent. Here's a short video illustration of some of what the bank does.
Africa is moving. Away from commodity-based exports to value-added exports and services. Africa is young and innovative. Africa is transforming, developing its green economy and growing its blue economy. At the African Export-Import Bank, this is the Africa we are striving for.
And the president of Afreximbank, Professor Benedict Oramah, is still with me in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for your patience. Lovely snazzy video there, but the complaints I've heard suggest that people say that if they go to you, your interest rates are enormously high. I mean, you would have thought that the rates would be lower because you're trying to spur the sort of private sector development and all that sort of thing. I mean, I was being told that, 7%, for example, to take a loan with additional fees, and by the time it's all done, you're looking at 11 to 12%, and that's the kind of loans that you give to Africans. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not, because you're the president, so you can tell us.
That's certainly wrong. But what I can tell you is that we price our facilities according to market. Our prices are market conform. While we have a limited amount of grants and technical assistance, our facilities are provided on market basis. And the reason we are doing this is because we know that any business that survives based on market will survive. I've never seen any economy developed on grants.
That's a good point.
If you give grants, the businesses will not compete globally. So any business that cannot be sustained based on what the market does should be allowed to go down, because that is not what the economy needs. But what we do not go out of the market. And I can tell you why. Today, we have a pipeline of more than $60 billion. That doesn't look to me like something people are running away from. If anything, we have challenges on how to meet the demand.
Right, but what kind of interest rates do you offer then?
Well, LIBOR-based. It's LIBOR plus a spread. And the spread is determined by our overall cost of funds, because LIBOR may not necessarily be the cost of funds. Of course, what we see in the market, country risk, the risk of the entity that we are dealing with. And of course, there may be some liquidity premium depending on the kind of transaction and the market we're operating in.
Because I mean, the impression we have is that you're supposed to be a development bank. I mean, is that an erroneous impression?
A development bank is not a gift-giving bank.
Yeah, I understand that, but I mean, obviously, the point is that in order to promote and support development, your interest rates should be reasonably low, certainly lower than commercial rates, shouldn't it?
Of course, our rates must be lower. That's why the commercial banks take our money and don't lend. Otherwise, they can't do it. And we are the biggest lender in Nigeria, for example. We are the biggest lender to the commercial banks. I think our exposure to commercial banks in Nigeria must be about $2 billion today. And a pipeline that runs into, I don't know how many billion.
But why is it that commercial banks in Nigeria aren't lending that money on to people? Because I mean, the way that you develop a society is private sector, and they've got to have funding. They have to have reasonable interest rates. I mean, the interest rates in Nigeria are outrageous, and they've got to have interest rates in order to take the money, develop what they have to do, and survive.
I believe that the banks are lending the money, but the banks have to lend the money to bankable deals. You see, there's a mistake.
But they're lending most of their money to the government.
I don't think the money we give to them, they give to the government. I can assure you. Because we also see their own lending plans. We are a policy bank. We cannot lend money and somebody just uses it the way they want. So we see the underlying uses for the money. And of course, we also lend directly to businesses. If you look across, today, we are the biggest lender to indigenous oil producers. Today, we are the only international bank that supported the power sector in Nigeria. So,
well, where's the power?
Well, we are the power sector has to be reformed further, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it's gone through so many reforms over so many years. Do you see it as a bankable project? Because you're talking about bankable projects. You've had years of failed electricity projects in this country.
Some of them are bankable.
Right.
Some of them are bankable. But that does not mean you don't need more reforms so that you can have power. And it's a grinding process, I can tell you. The kind of things that have happened over the years have to be changed in a way that doesn't even cause more problems. And I think the government is doing that. So for us, it is to find where we play our own role, to make sure that indigenous capacities are brought to bear to these sectors. Because as far as we're concerned, it is our people that will develop our continent. So anybody that we see that has the capacity, that has the capability, that has the integrity, and I repeat, integrity, we support the entity.
So what's the big challenge that you face today? Is it to develop and support more intra-African trade? Because I think I've heard you talking about that. Or are you still essentially battling to have a share of global trade?
Oh, the way we've looked at our strategy is this. The continent is where it is today because historically it had looked to the north. It's south-north trade. But south-north trade has a fundamental flaw. It's commodity-based. Because it is commodity-based, it's exploitative of us as a people. We allow people to come to our continent to take our raw materials, even metals and minerals that are non-renewable. They pay us some little amount of money. They take it away to their countries. They add value to it. They sell it back to us at 5 times the price. I call that exploitation. So the only way we can begin to change it is to begin to trade more amongst ourselves and create regional value chains. And that is why the arrowhead of our strategy is the promotion of intra-African trade. Because we know that it's intra-African trade that will begin to diversify our economies, to move them away from commodities. It is the promotion of intra-African trade that will create regional value chains, create jobs, and restore the dignity of the African. It is that promotion of intra-African trade that will make it possible for us to bring down the borders that currently divide us and make things difficult for us today.
Professor Benedict Oramah, President of Afreximbank, I want to thank you very much indeed for coming in and talking with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles.